Hi, everybody, and welcome to this high-level overview of accessibility testing in mobile applications. I am not going to rush through it too much because there's a lot to cover, though. So this is only like the surface of accessibility testing when you're using a mobile. And I do have some pre-recorded demos. I was about to say live demos because live demos, in my experience, tend to go very, very wrong, which is why I've pre-recorded them. However, there's still mistakes in them because I like to show the human side, as it were. So, housekeeping to start off with. I'm sure you've seen this if you've been to other talks, but you can keep your video on during the session, but please mute your microphones, although I seem to be the only one with my video on because I like to show off my funky top. Yes. Please use the chat for any technical issues or questions. I will ask people to share vocally if you want to, because I like it to look like I'm actually talking to someone. Automated captions are provided. Turn them on if you need them. The instructions are only if you're using the Teams desktop application. They're not available in the web viewer. You've got the toolbar, the three dots, and the option to turn on the captions. It might interpret what I'm saying into something more interesting. So you never know, it could be worth just having a look to see what it's like. And if you need a sign language interpreter, please message a help desk. And yes, also please stick to the code of conduct. In other words, don't be mean to me. So for the agenda today, the applications I'm going to cover, responsive, native, and hybrid. Assistive technology for mobiles, the checks that you should be doing for testing, and advanced tests, the automated tools. So I have a question for all of you. What is your experience with accessibility testing on a mobile? Feel free to answer A, B, C, D, which I should have put in here to make it more accessible. Hindsight is evil like that. But whereabouts are you fitting in? Are you someone who's tested mobile applications with accessibility more than 10 times? More than twice, but less than 10? Once, not started here to learn the basics? Okay, so Shanaz, I'll be coming to you for answers if I get things wrong. And Jakub as well, yes. So we do have a few people that have some experience and others here just for the basics. So that will make it interesting for me. Normally I have one or the other, which means I can shape it more to the audience. Here it's going to be one size fits all, I'm afraid. I'm an A here, so otherwise I wouldn't be doing the course. So for a discussion, when it comes to making mobile applications accessible, what kind of things have you done and how have you approached it? Has there been anything you found to be a sticking point or anything that I can address later on that is causing issues that you want to go through? And what's your experience of creating mobile applications? Do you have any sticking points with it where it should work, but it doesn't, because when you're using native applications, you have different code bases, and what is possible in HTML is not possible, say, in Swift. And how has that shaped your favorite application? Are there any development ones that you like, and what do you like about it? So are there any feel free to just add these as you go, but these are things I'd like people to think about when they're thinking about accessibility in mobiles, because I often find people assume that you only need it to be accessible on desktop. Mobile is too niche to be made accessible. Like I remember thinking, how will they use a keyboard with the screen reader? Would they have their own added on keyboard, when in actual fact the gestures you can use negates the use for a keyboard? So a Bluetooth keyboard is not necessary always for testing. And you also find that some of the applications that can really help you will be things like the API tools I go on later. And others find the screen readers, the tools that are inbuilt to your phone to help read out the content on the page, can be helpful for things like when you're driving. If someone wants to hear a message that's been sent to them, they can get VoiceOver to announce it to them. So sometimes accessible tools have become daily tools that people use. So that adds in the need to make mobile applications accessible. So the types of mobile application, responsive. So web, just because it's a website doesn't mean it's not an application. It is obviously not responsible for the functionality within the browser, but you're still responsible for the content. And they can be easier to test when you're migrating from desktop to mobile, because you have similar fixes for the same problem. I say similar because, as we all know, the more screen readers you introduce, the more fixes you need to be aware of. And things like being aware that the abbreviation tag doesn't work with mobile technology very well compared to desktop technology, it does work. So then thinking about how you label things behind the scenes can really change. And then we have the native app, which is using Java or Swift. These make it more complex because the limitations that you don't have in HTML, you do have in the native applications. So sometimes being aware of the differences and also how the development teams are shaped. I found myself that when it comes to native applications, I like to have one bug for Android, one bug for iOS. There are other operating systems available, but these are the two main ones we tend to focus on. And that's mainly because you've got two different teams with two different languages that they're writing, and you want to make sure the bugs get fixed. Sometimes if you have one mobile team, you can combine them, but because you have to have different fixes for the same issue, I think it's simple to keep it separate. And then you've got the hybrid app where it is wrapped around with your application, but it's got a web view in the middle. And that one often has a few headaches because sometimes the content in the web view isn't able to be focused with a screen reader. So it's how it's hosted can make a lot of issues. And I'm going to go through the main accessibility tools you're likely to use. So the first one, screen readers. You've got Talkback for Android or VoiceOver for iOS. Talkback for Android is recommended even if you've got a Samsung phone, because I know you have Voice Assistant installed on your phone automatically, but when it comes to using screen readers, Talkback is better. It has a context menu that you don't have with Voice Assistant. So you can download it, luckily, in Google Play, I think it is, and use it on your Android phone. So yes, that's always an important part because Voice Assistant is similar enough to mislead you into thinking it will do the same functionality to then find you actually have bugs due to the screen reader. Now we've also got the display settings that we can change. You can increase the zoom on the display, the resolution. You can also change the font size, and you can also change contrast. These are often overlooked when it comes to some accessibility testing because a lot of mobile applications ignore what font size you've set on your phone, which I see as the worst thing ever because it should respect people's choices. If I need to see larger text, but I don't want to have big pictures, I want to have an increased font size without seeing a blown up picture of whatever news article I'm trying to read. It's all personal choices because you've got a limited space on your phone. You need to make sure that people use it to what works best for them. There's interaction controls. So you can also have, I'm sure we've all done it where again, when you're driving, using Siri or someone to call whoever to let them know you're late, so you don't have to use your hands. Technically, apparently that's still naughty and you shouldn't do it, but I have done occasionally. Generally, when it's to let the husband know I'm not ignoring him, I'm just busy driving. But they're also useful for people that might not have as much mobility, so that they can tell their phone who to call, who to text, how to interact with their phone, and it's a great help. And then we've got Braille. I have to admit, I do not know Braille enough to be able to test these, but there are tools like BrailleBack that can help people translate what's on the page into Braille for those that are blind and deaf. And then audio, the one that often gets overlooked is captions. I hope that if anyone's got the captions on for this talk, that what's coming out is what I'm saying, or it comes out very scarily. And there's also real-time text. So for people that might be hard of hearing, they can use that as a way to communicate with friends via messaging. And there's also mono audio to help change how things are heard on the phone, to help block out certain sounds that might be difficult. Now, I've gone to the WebAim survey and I have nicked their table, as I claim at the side. When people were asked which of the following mobile screen readers do you commonly use, we see a higher percentage for VoiceOver on iOS than we do have for Talkback. The reason for that partly is because Apple is more robust when it comes to using a screen reader. And quite often, people that need to use assistive technology on a daily basis like to have the ones that give them less of a headache. However, Talkback has improved recently, and I think it's going up in its usage at the moment. And when you look at the percentages being like 70% and 30%, and then the rest being below 10, this is why we focus on VoiceOver and Talkback. And if you ever have a responsive site, I recommend focusing on Apple because they've got a larger market share and it's likely to have less quirks, as they say. So you're more likely to get actual issues rather than maybe screen reader issues where the focus can jump a bit with Android. Now, I'm not going to focus on the screen for too long. This is basically how to activate Talkback. And you'll notice I have in the middle here. So you go from Settings, Smart Assistants, Accessibility, and then Talkback. Smart Assistants is something, one of the menu items on Hawaii phone. I have an Hawaii phone because I wanted to have one that has Talkback native. However, they have less support these days due to some ongoing stuff behind the scenes. So I've added that in as a note. It might just be settings accessibility on your phone. And also, if you don't have Talkback automatically enabled, you might have to go to a different page with the accessibility suite, I think it is, to then enable Talkback. And now for the exciting bit, I'm going to do my Talkback demo. Can everyone see the screen okay? I'm going to take silence as a yes.
Yeah.
Okay, here we go. Welcome to this demonstration of using Talkback on an Android phone. Now we're going to activate Talkback by going through to the settings. Smart Assistants. On some mobile phones, it's just accessibility without the Smart Assistants option. Go to Accessibility, Talkback, and then I'll toggle the on-off switch. Most people expect to hear Talkback at this point, but you don't until you activate him or her.
Talkback on. Talkback.
Now I'm going to focus the home icon, which is at the bottom of the mobile screen.
Home button. Double tap to activate. Double tap and hold to long press.
You hear hints of how to use Talkback whenever you focus certain items. You can turn it off with verbosity, but it helps when you come to custom items where you're not sure how to activate them.
Huawei Home. Setting. Home. Huawei Home. Weather. Double.
Sometimes when you use the two-finger tap to make her quiet,
Sorry.
it might open something as you saw there. However, if you swipe left to right, short, sharp swipes to go through the items, we're going to go down to the Chrome browser icon.
Camera. Chrome. Chrome. Home. Button. Double tap to activate. Double tap and hold to long press.
Now we're going to go through the items on the home page for AbilityNet. So as we swipe through.
Skip to content. Home. Link. AbilityNet homepage. Double tap to activate. Collapsed. Menu. Pop-up button. Double tap to change. Actions available. You swipe up then right to view.
Now you'll notice that you don't instantly hear it's a menu button. It's often best to wait to hear all the hints before you progress if it's a new item you've not come across before. Most users will change the speed of how the hints are read out. I leave it at the default because I believe most users, when they're new to it, will have the default settings. So I'm going to double tap. Again, you'd expect to hear the change after something happens.
Expanded.
But you have to wait a while to hear it. Another way to hear it is to go back and forth. So swipe left to right.
Collapsed.
And then right to left.
Expanded. Menu. Pop-up button.
Next, we're going to go through the local context menu. So if I swipe up and left.
Collapsed. Alert local context menu. Actions in list 2 items. Double tap to activate.
The top level menu is whether or not you're choosing what actions for the item that you're on. We're going to go to navigation of how we're navigating the page.
Navigate. Alert navigation. Default in list 9 items. Double tap to activate.
Now you'll see here that you've got a list of items of different elements you might want to focus on when you're testing. So first off, I'm going to swipe through the headings. So I focus headings and double tap it.
Headings. Headings.
And notice the focus stays where it was before, even though that wasn't a heading. So the first swipe, left to right, will not be correct.
Latest news. COVID-19 update. All of our services are still available. Heading 2.
And in that case, it was correct. So, but sometimes, because the focus is not automatically on a heading after you change the navigation, 2 swipes to get it back onto the headings. And you'll notice as we go through, we're only going to focus items marked as a heading.
Latest news. Accessibility and inclusive design training. Heading. Accessibility for copywriters. Heading 2.
Now I'm going to change the context of the navigation.
Alert local heading. Link. Controls.
And
Double tap to activate.
Because I want to go to a form field, so I'm going to focus controls.
Controls.
And notice I don't have to double tap on the item itself. I double tap anywhere on the screen after it's been announced. And then I'm going to go backwards.
Sort alphabetically. Collapsed. Search form. Button.
So I'm going to do a search now. So I'll double tap.
Edit box. Enter the terms you wish to search for. Search. Showing English, UK, QWERTY keyboard. Showing left-handed keyboard. Expanded. Showing autofill pop-up. Edit options available. Use swipe up then right to view.
Now, one thing that can be confusing is the keyboard doesn't act like buttons. Instead, what you do is you use your finger to drag across until you hear the letter that you want to type. This might seem not intuitive, but for a blind user, they know the keyboard's at the bottom of the screen. So all we do is keep the finger on the screen until we hear a letter we want to type.
Capital K, capital I, capital U, capital what, capital U, uniform, close features menu, capital U.
And then for the next letter, we're going to do another drag.
F, Foxtrot, T, Y, U, I, O, P, P.
And I'm going to press return now. So if I continue the drag and find it.
F, G, A, M. Go. Progress bar. Open features menu. 100%. Search AbilityNet. Web view.
So I've now typed in a search term and searched successfully. You can also scroll down the screen using 2 fingers to move the screen focus. You'll hear those icons to indicate where you are within the page. When we get to the very end, you'll hear it gets a lot higher. And then you heard the highest one to indicate you're at the bottom of the page. And here I'm going to now navigate the links only. So I'm going to do the context menu. And because the whole page is selected, it's not letting me do the context menu. So it was a little bit on the slow side there. And I'm going to go to links.
Links. Double tap to act links. Home. Sign up for our newsletter. It's easy done. Subscribe and we will never share. Progress 100%. Sign up for our newsletter, AbilityNet. Web view.
So those are the basic ways to use Talkback. Remember that sometimes there is a slight delay according to what you've just done, but overall it is usable for testing and can be made more simple when you use the local context menu. Thank you.
Okay, so you'll be glad to know the voiceover demo is a lot shorter. I also had a question about from Catherine about, I mentioned I've got a Hawaii device. Android device I would recommend for testing Talkback on would be a Google Pixel. I have to admit, personally, I didn't have the money at the time when I was buying my Android device, so I went for the cheaper alternative. It all depends. I mean, if it's your main phone, Samsung is fine. Just make sure you've downloaded Talkback and not using the inbuilt screen reader. So I shall progress on a bit, and welcome to all those that joined during that demonstration. You can all tell I work at AbilityNet as I was using the website to show it. I'm going to go through these very quickly. The video shows the basic gestures in this screen of the touch or move and the swipe right. The one thing I'll say, whenever it comes to testing with a screen reader, short, sharp swipes. I've seen people do very long, dragged out swipes, and then the focus will jump around. Like you noticed a couple of times I accidentally had it jump. Sometimes it's because you're not being consistently direct. And the last thing you want is to accidentally have the focus jumping and thinking it's a bug when it's the point between the keyboard and the chair that's at fault, as in me. So, and I believe these slides will also be shared separately from the talk, which will have all these advanced gestures as well. With Talkback, you have more up and down, moving left and right, and so on. And the global context menu is the one for changing Talkback settings as well. And remember, on Voice Assistant, you don't have the local or the global context menu. So I'm going to, for activating VoiceOver, pretty universal because it's the same operating system for most iPhones. I say most because you might have a different version. And you go to Settings, General, Accessibility, VoiceOver. No, you don't even go to General. Sorry, that was a mistake. You just go Settings, Accessibility, VoiceOver, and turn VoiceOver on. And I will amend that slide because I obviously added in an extra one just to see if anyone was paying attention. And this is a lot shorter. It's not going to go through the page navigation and so on. It's just going to go through some of the points that I find when it comes to testing can be overlooked in the how you get from one screen to another.
Welcome to this demo of using VoiceOver on an iOS phone. First, we're going to open up Settings, go to Accessibility, select VoiceOver, and before I activate him, I'm going to make sure that I have Caption Panel turned on. If I have Caption Panel turned on, it will show what VoiceOver says. And I'm going to activate.
VoiceOver on. Settings. Accessibility. Back button.
Two-finger tap will keep him quiet. Now, if I want to scroll up and pause slightly, so if I do a single finger swipe up, holding it down, when I feel a vibration, it will go back to the previous page.
Calendar.
And now I'm going to select Safari.
Dock. Safari. Double tap to open. Use 3D touch to show home screen.
And I can double tap anywhere on the screen with focus on Safari and open it.
Safari. Format arch.
And you'll notice that I'm on the AbilityNet homepage and I'm going to swipe through. I do short left to right swipes to go through each item in turn.
Address. Reload. Skip to content. Home. Visited. Link. Image. AbilityNet header. Banner. Landmark. Menu. Button. Navigation. Landmark. Menu pop-up. Collapsed. Double tap to expand.
As you notice, I can leave VoiceOver reading out everything and the verbosity is set to add the hints. So it tells me if something's expanded, it will tell me what actions I can take. So I'm going to double tap.
Menu. Navigation. Landmark. Menu pop-up. Expanded.
And it tells me when it's expanded. So I'm going to swipe through here.
DSA&E service. IT support. DSA&E menu. Button. Navigation. Land. Menu. Navigation. Landmark. Menu pop-up. Collapsed.
Now, I want to navigate through the home page, but maybe not through every single item. So what I do then is have a two-finger rotation.
Containers. Edit. Language. Buttons. 0 buttons.
And he'll instantly tell me there's no buttons on the page. I can continue and select something else like headings.
Landmarks. Form controls. Links. Headings. 0 headings.
And if I swipe down.
COVID-19 update. All of our services are still available. Heading level 2.
So he lied. There are headings in here.
Latest news. Heading level 2. Accessibility and inclusive design training. Heading level 2. Accessibility for copywriters. Heading level 2. Link.
So we can navigate through the headings. I'm now going to go through the form controls. And if I swipe round the other way, I can go back on what I'd previously gone through.
Links. Set form controls. 12 form controls.
Now, the reason why I said 0 before was because the focus was on a button. I'm going to swipe up. So
sort alphabetic, sort by, search form, button, end, AbilityNet header, banner, end, banner, collapsed.
I'm now going to double tap the search button. and focus the search field.
Menu. Home. Menu. Enter the terms you wish to search for. Text field. Search.
So I'm going to double
Double
tap.
tap to edit. Use the rotor to access insertion point at end.
So he's telling me that I'm inserting at the end of the field, and the keyboard is at the bottom of the page. Now, if I focus on anything,
Cap T. Tango.
I will hear the key I'm on, and if I swipe through, say if I want to get to H,
Cap 1. Cap A. Cap G. Cap H. Hotel.
when I want to tap on it, I double tap.
Cap H.
I can also do a finger swipe around
Oscar.
and type this way, but I can do it either swiping through each sequentially, or I can use the finger drag round, which is a little bit more noisy.
W. Whiskey. W. Search. Format up. Skip to content. Link.
So I've searched for the items, I've entered text, and I've shown how to display the text on VoiceOver as he talks. And there is also an option to turn VoiceOver on or off using the accessibility shortcut, which I've set up, which means if I press the power button 3 times,
VoiceOver off.
VoiceOver will turn on or off wherever I am.
Okay, so that was a little bit shorter, that one. Yes, the home button. You also have Talkback shortcuts. If you enable those, for the Hawaii one, I have to press the volume up and down at the same time for the count of 3 for Talkback to turn on as well. But yes, it does help to have Siri or the shortcut to help, because I have to admit, when I went through the menu and then I was like, how do I get back to the home screen? I did have to look it up, which helped me realize that there's a lot that I sometimes miss out just by using the shortcuts. So it is good to help starting with the basics. Do you know which is the best resource to start learning how to code accessible mobile applications? I would say go to either Apple or Google and look on their pages. I would also recommend looking at the BBC. They have the website with the starter points of what is possible, what's not possible, the code to look at. So I forget now the link for the news site, but I'm sure there must be a BBC person online at the moment who will have that, because I found myself, I learned a lot from them. So I owe the BBC my ability to make mistakes during recordings of demos of how to use a screen reader. But no, to be honest, that's self-inflicted. But yes, the BBC is a good starting point, and looking directly at the developer guides, they have the high level and the more detailed items for you to look at. And there's also other resources available, but double check whatever you're using online, because what can be true for one person might not work in one application. So it's a minefield. Knowing the code base helps a lot. So again, the basic gestures and the advanced gestures. So covered the main points of how to use the screen readers. So for the design recommendations, one thing that I think is very important is color ratios, because you've got a smaller screen, and although technically it's not set as having well 4.5 to 1 as a minimum, technically large text is 3 to 1. I think due to the size of the screen, even if you've got a large iPhone like I do, I don't think there's any such thing as large text on a small screen. You have to have a certain resolution for that to work. So I think you should stick to 4.5 to 1, but some say you should do the AAA of 7 to 1 for the color ratios. because smaller screen, harder to see. And these are all questions I always ask myself whenever I come to an application. Is content meaningful? Is repeated content consistent? For instance, is the navigation the same throughout, or do you change it according to which page you're on? Sometimes you have to, depending on the journey you take, for instance, the step-based one. But generally, if it's something within an application where you can go to multiple pages, you have the same way to move around. The reason why I say hover or focus for buttons and links is because it is possible to do keyboard only testing, but it's the same for anything. You don't rule anything out, but you can limit how much you test with, because there's only so much that time you have, and I think sometimes keeping it to the bare minimum helps. But how are they formatted? Will zooming text or increasing line spacing be handled? That obviously is a WCAG 2.1 with the line spacing, but it is possible to apply applets to change the spacing of your phone, to change the font, and so on. So yes, zooming, you need to think about how it's going to reflow, because it will also help on your desktop. If it works on a mobile, you're more likely to pass on the desktop because that's the screen you're thinking of for a reflow. And changing the orientation, again, a must-have for WCAG 2.1, because you need to be able to change orientation. You can never guarantee how someone chooses to use their phone. And if someone maybe has limited mobility and have it in a harness which is fixed, if your site will only work portrait and they have it landscape, you're discriminating against that person's preferred choice. And images, are they informative or decorative? I always say if you've got a question you're not 100% sure, add a description, because the people that I've talked to when it comes to images is if they've got partial sight and using a screen reader and they can see something's there, they prefer to know what they're missing out on than to not have anything there at all. So if you're never 100% sure, I believe it's easier to have more information that they can bypass by just swiping through than not having it there at all. And it's the same for desktop, really. Yes, adding keyboard check for focus issues and tab order, but we'll get onto the testing in a second there, Yakub. I do think keyboard is needed, but you also have the same with using the different context menus and rotors to be able to move around to certain items in the structure. Keyboard I see as a nice to have if you've got time, because again, not everyone has a Bluetooth keyboard to hand, and the tabbing through should be the same if you have a responsive site and you're testing it on your desktop. So you can cheat, as it were. And yes, Laurie, you do test native apps against WCAG. I know that the W3C have mappings for that, and with the 2.1, 2.2, and hopefully in 3, it's going to be more about the digital content rather than how it's hosted. So whether it's web or native, and a lot of the, even WCAG2, it does apply across the different items. You might have slight variations, but I do say if I can swipe to it and tap it using a screen reader, I should be able to focus it with the keyboard, and vice versa. So you should be able to test either or with a bit of a pinch of salt. I say the swiping part for a screen reader as a keyboard alternative, because if you can't, it's not working for all input devices. And I know the wording is specific to HTML items, but with a little bit of common sense and just thinking, well, if I can't access this, then it's a failure. It doesn't matter which checkpoint it comes under, a user can't use it. So yes, and you do test native apps. I demonstrated on web mainly because I decided to not break any branding and use the AbilityNet one. I'll get them to build a few native apps so I can do it on a native app next time instead. But yes, for testing, use the basics and defaults. I say that because I always test assuming I'm not an expert power user. I am a beginner, as you saw from my demos. But at the same time, it's the beginners that we need to be checking for more than anything else, because it's those people that are going to be more frustrated, not know the workarounds, than the people that are the power users are used to something being not accessible and knowing how to bypass that. Yes, and Alistair, that's a very good point. Bluetooth keyboard navigation iOS it doesn't work. If you're going to do Bluetooth keyboard testing, Android only, because I think unless you buy an Apple keyboard, and even then it's limited, you can't really use it. And thank you, David and Emma, for the links, and Marta and Jess. I do appreciate all the help. So yes, testing, always check the images. If you're never 100% sure, I believe they should have a description of some sort. Actionable items, how do they work? Form errors and status messages, they're very interesting. I know going for WCAG 2.1 with the new status message announcement, be very careful with alerts on especially Android, where it will sometimes move the focus of wherever you are to the alert. I think it's improved a lot, but I remember when I first started testing on native application, I swore quite a bit whenever I was trying to do an action, and I ended up having the focus taken away back to this updating banner when I wanted to be down at the bottom of the page looking at some products. So be aware of how you alert people to issues. Page titles, headings, zoom or font size changes. I do feel that gets overlooked a lot because people say the magnifier works, but technically the checkpoint says without assistive technology you should be able to zoom. I also use screenshots for color contrast checks. You can also use APIs to help there. And changing orientation as well. So those are the main ones I use when it comes to testing. There are others, as we've mentioned, like with the keyboard. We can use inbuilt applications on Android for web or application debugging. It's Accessibility Scanner, which I will show in a moment. And if you've got a Mac device, you can use Xcode, which you link up your phone to be able to debug applications on your iOS. You can also use the developer suite on Windows to debug Android applications. So there are multiple ways you can debug. Do the old-fashioned checking the code works or should work as intended. There are limitations when it comes to application testing in the fact that I keep saying what you can do in HTML is not always the same for iOS and Android. And sometimes I'm trying to be careful how much I say there because it changes. The more I learn, the more I know it's changing each time. But for instance, iOS Swift cannot group form elements. You can group them if you use certain ways of applying it, but there are some bits that are not inbuilt. You have to go around the houses and add hints to be able to group items and label like radio buttons together. So Android automated accessibility tools. So we've got the accessibility scanner. Download it from the Play Store. You just run it for free and you start recording. I've just done some screens here. It highlights everything that's at fault. Then you can drill down into items at fault where it will show you in a screenshot where it is in the application. And it will also give you a view by category so you can drill down into items like touch target is too small or text contrast is not good enough. And you can export that into one file and put it into your bug tracking system. This is something that might be better for developers to use as part of unit testing before they release stuff, but it's also good for, especially if you're working on a client that you don't work with normally, so that you can check things that they might have missed. And there's also the lint testing tool. You do need the APK to do this. And every APK I had available to me was accessible according to lint, so I wasn't able to show very good demonstrations of it. And then using Xcode, you have the accessibility inspector that can work. Here I've got my son's school gateway that I'm testing on my mobile phone. It's installed on my phone so I can inspect it and run the audit on the current view. So I'm going to have a quick look at questions. I think it's possible to simulate keyboard interaction programmatically to automate some screen reader checks. It does involve more than just the free help that I've highlighted here. But yes, keyboard interaction is something that I think iOS, that's the only bit on iOS that has been troublesome. But you can, another thing you can do is switch testing. If you've got a Bluetooth keyboard, you can do switch testing, set it up properly with a Bluetooth keyboard, because then it's easier to turn off again. I found doing my head interactions on my iOS phone meant I had to reboot my phone to get it to work, which wasn't so good. But switch testing is another thing you can do to make sure that when using Bluetooth keyboard, that you're able to navigate through the items and interact with them as you'd expect. And I didn't cover that in this, but it's something I recommend having the full instructions before. But the Bluetooth keyboard, yes, I think you can have an application where you have the keyboard on screen or something like that. I haven't done it for a while, Emma. So, but yes, the accessibility to avoid reboots. I found out the hard way, Alistair. And yes, it does. Some of the checks, like the API stuff, I think is better done by the developers because they know their code really well. However, at the same time, we can still give them a generated report and let them know things are being flagged in this tool that needs to be addressed. So takeaways, there's lots of different tools. Screen readers, interaction methods, display settings, advanced tests. I'm rushing through because I'm realizing that maybe I shouldn't have done all my demos because they're quite long. I'm going to skip questions because I think we've answered most of them. Useful resources were things like the scanner, lint, and accessibility inspector as part of the Xcode. And one thing I recommend for anyone who's new to accessibility testing is have a play. The worst thing is, after having a talk, not doing a little bit of practical examples, is you forget instantly everything that I might have talked to you about. So hands-on exercise is turn on your screen reader, open your favorite application, and try navigating to the menu, or try doing one task that you do on a daily basis, and see how it works. Again, turn on the shortcut first to make it easier to turn off. iOS should read push notifications. If they don't, they haven't been coded quite right. You can, so long as you use the right alert dialog, it is possible to set it up in a way that VoiceOver will announce it. And financial charts, I always believe in tables. Yes, I did, Emma. I did mention the accessibility scanner app. I rushed through it so quickly because I was running out of time. And yes, there is a slightly more advanced tool. This is just a high level for everything. And I do like Google's Accessibility Scanner app because it is good at recording a very simple journey that you go through and so on. Yes, the technical side. So if you do find anything unusual, go and have a chat with the developer.